Welcome YouTube to Thursday, is it? I don't know, I've lost count. It's something else, really. It's like an extended vacation, but with nothing to do, so crazy. Anyways, got 6 or 7 things to get through today, so I'm not going to waste any breath on nonsense. We've been continuing our 80s movie watching, as well as some later movies, to kind of mix things up, stuff that I've really liked and is in my collection. And so we'll get right into it. I got 6 movies here. The first one was one of my 80s choices, and it is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. This is the follow-up to the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it's been 5 years since the events of that film, and a family, the Walsh family, has moved into Nancy's old house, and of course their dad got it at a really good price, but he didn't disclose why to the rest of his family. So their oldest son, their older son, he has a younger sister. His name is Jesse, and after they move in, he starts having these nightmares about this Freddy. He doesn't know who he is just yet, but he's having the same nightmares as Nancy had, and he doesn't know what's going on. He blames it on the fact that the house is really warm all the time for some reason, and his friend Lisa, who he's also kind of chasing as a girlfriend at school, he kind of discloses stuff to her, and he gets in a fight in gym class with this guy named Grady, and they later become friends. So he's having all these difficulties at school and at home, and his dad's a real prick a lot of the time. And all of a sudden things start to get weirder, though. Random fires, like the toaster lights on fire at home, and it's not even plugged in. Their bird eventually escapes its cage, and it spontaneously combusts. And as Jesse's dreams continue, Freddy asks Jesse to kill for him. So he's starting to get freaked out, and then one night, eventually, he has this nightmare where he's out at this gay bar, and his coach Schneider, who treats him like shit in gym class, is there, and he takes him back to the school to discipline Jesse. And while Jesse's hitting the showers after his physical activity, Coach Schneider is killed by Freddy, and Jesse later on is roaming the city wide awake and naked, and gets brought home by the cops to his parents. His dad thinks he's on drugs, and the next day he shows up at school and finds out that Coach Schneider was killed for real, and he's like, what? So he's like, I did that. Next on, Lisa's having a big party. He goes, but as he's calming down and making out with Lisa, suddenly Freddy's tongue is sticking out of his mouth, and he's like, what? So then he bolts. He goes to Grady's house. He's like, Grady, I'm going in to my dream. You gotta wake me up if anything weird goes on. Grady falls asleep. Freddy pops out of Jesse's body, kills Grady, and the nightmare just keeps on continuing. Eventually, Freddy terrorizes Lisa's party, and Lisa's dad scares Freddy away with a shotgun, and Lisa, with all the destruction and killing that's going on, she's like, I gotta go after Jesse. I gotta go save him. And so she heads to the energy plant where Freddy used to work, because she knows that's where he'll be. And she uses her wits to outwit Freddy and bring him down by not being afraid of him. And underneath Freddy's ruined corpse, of course, is Jesse hiding in there, and he seems to be A-okay, and she saves the day. So of all the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, and there's a lot of them, this is a good movie, but it's not one of my favorites of all the ones that came afterwards. They got a lot better as it kind of went on. So it's still a great movie and worth the watch, but not my favorite of the ones that came out. The original is amazing, probably the best one, but there's lots of really good sequels too, but that one's kind of lower on my list of favorite sequels. Next up, another sequel, this time to the movie we watched a little while ago, right around the same time we watched the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and this one is called Jewel of the Nile, the follow-up to Romancing the Stone. So this was released in 1985, and basically it's been 6 months, and Joan and Jack have been living on the yacht that he bought with all the money from their previous adventure. And Joan's getting a little stir crazy. She wants to go back to New York because she's got writer's block. She wants to work on her book, talk to her editor, that sort of thing. Whereas Jack just wants to keep on sailing the world and going to different exotic places. They get in an argument. Things are starting to go south. And suddenly a rich ruler named Omar shows up and is like, Joan Wilder, I want you to come back to Africa, to my kingdom, and write my biography for my people to see how great I am. And so she's like, well, this is my chance of a lifetime to write a non-fictional piece that, could be very important and give me, an even bigger break in my writing career. And Jack's like, no. So they go their separate ways. Joan is getting ready to leave for Africa with Omar. Meanwhile, Jack is going out to get some supplies before he gets back on his boat and heads out. He gets intercepted by Ralph, who's played by Danny DeVito, who was one half of the pair that was causing them problems in the first movie. And he kind of takes Jack by gunpoint and says, "Ooh, I want in on this Jewel of the Nile business," which is part of what's going on with... before that, this guy named Tarek intercepts Jack and says, "You have to go after Joan. She's in danger. Omar is a bad man." And then he starts talking about this Jewel of the Nile sort of thing. So then Ralph overhears this, and that's when he gets the jump on Jack. And he's like, oh, I want in on this. I want the jewel. We'll split it, whatever. And so eventually the three of these guys, Tarek, Jack, and Ralph, head for Africa after Joan in, let's just say, a tentative three-way agreement where nobody really trusts each other, but all Jack knows is that he needs to make sure Joan is safe. So they get to Africa after Joan, but Joan in the meantime, she's given the run of the palace at Omar's place and told to, ask anybody anything, take all the pictures you want. But as she starts getting out there and doing that, she starts getting shut down by guards and stuff like that. She starts hearing stories about Omar actually being a bad guy. So then eventually she kind of learns Omar's true colors and learns that he has stolen this jewel of the Nile from a tribe. And the jewel, though, is not an actual stone. It's a man, Al-Julhara or something like that, a holy man that's very important to some tribes or a certain tribe in the region. So as Jack and Ralph and Tarek chase Joan and get into the action, they learn that the jewel is in fact a guy and not a jewel. And so then Ralph kind of turns on Jack and kind of lines up with Omar. And then it's just this kind of action-y finale where Jack has to save Joan at the Omar's big kind of ceremony to give a big, almost a Nazi-like speech to his people where he's gonna pump his own tires and become a unquestioned ruler, right? So then it's up to Jack to save Joan and get the jewel back and make sure and bring Omar down, restore the tribe, and just make everything right, sort of thing. So another lighthearted, fun adventure movie from the 80s that starred that Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner duo. Sorry, I'm cold and I'm tired, and when I'm both of those things I yawn, so when I'm both of them at once, it's double yawns. Anyways, I don't think there was any more sequels after these two. I think those are the only two that were made, but they're just great. Like I said, there's a bit of romance and mushiness in it, but overall they're just great adventure movies that I remember watching a lot as a kid, and I really enjoy them. Next up, this is not an 80s movie, this is more recent, based on actually a graphic novel by a Canadian guy from Toronto named Brian Lee O'Malley, and which I've got them just over here. I read those many years ago, and then of course after the movie was made, had to watch it, had to get it, and it is called Scott Pilgrim versus the World. So Scott Pilgrim is like a early 20s guy who has been out of high school for a few years, doesn't have a job, is in this punk garage band that don't really have any prospects, and he just recently started dating a high school girl. So his friends and bandmates are giving him the business about that. He lives with his gay best friend Wallace in Wallace's apartment, and basically Scott has nothing to his name other than maybe his bass and his clothes. And so yeah, he's kind of at this standstill in life. Now, as he's dating this 17-year-old high school student named Knives Chow, he he really likes her, but they haven't really done anything. They haven't even kissed, but they like to hang out, play video games together, go to the music store, that sort of thing. But everybody is pissing on Scott for dating a high schooler. His sister Stacy, Stacy's friend Julie, but eventually one day he sees this girl with purple hair. Ramona Flowers is her name. He doesn't know who she is at the time, but he is smitten as a kitten with her. And when he goes to Julie's party one night, this girl, this Ramona Flowers, ends up being there, and he tries to approach her, totally bombs, but eventually learns that she is an Amazon delivery girl, and so he orders something from Amazon and basically waits for her to show up, kind of wrangles her into going on a date, and eventually invites her to the first round of the Battle of the Bands contest that his band has entered, and his band is called Sex Bob-omb. There's so much video game references in this series, it's crazy. So, but before he kind of gets going with Ramona, he doesn't break up with Knives, so them both showing up at the Battle of the Bands is a little awkward, let's say. Sorry, still yawning. So then as Scott kind of manages his life, he eventually has to break up with Knives, and she is totally heartbroken by it, but at the same time he quickly forgets her and is totally smitten and in love with Ramona. But one night during it's during that first night of the Battle of the Bands, this guy shows up out of nowhere named Matthew Patel and fights Scott, and it's like an epic kind of video game fight. And Scott's like, what the hell is that? And then Ramona's like, oh yeah, that's my first evil ex-boyfriend. And she's like, if you're going to want to be with me, you're going to have to fight all 7 of them. And Scott's like, okay. So then that's what kind of as he breaks up with Knives, gets going with Ramona, he's everywhere he goes, he kind of has to be a little wary because there's probably going to be somebody come gunning for him. And as it goes on, the challenges get harder and harder, and eventually it starts to wear on him, and always being in danger and getting his ass kicked. And eventually he kind of has a falling out with Ramona, and around the same time he's got more stress coming into his life because his evil ex-girlfriend Envy Adams, who has hit the big time with her band The Clash at Demon Head, comes back to town for a show, and the guy that she's dating now is actually one of Ramona's ex-boyfriends as well. So it all kind of culminates in this as Scott eliminates each ex-boyfriend, deals with Envy's stuff. He has to face the final ex-boyfriend who controls Ramona through a chip in her neck. I know it's weird. And who also controls Sex Bob-omb's fate because he's also a very influential and powerful music producer. So Scott's got all this stuff going on, but he doesn't care. He loves Ramona. That's all that matters to him. And so they're set for this final battle inside Gideon, that's this music producer, and the last of the evil ex-boyfriends, his new club or whatever it is. It all kind of culminates in this epic battle there, and Scott may or may not win his love back or lose her forever to Gideon. So like I said, this movie, there's so many video game references in it, it's crazy. Like when Scott defeats each ex-boyfriend, they turn into a pile of coins and he gets plus 1,000. When he takes a leak, there's a pee bar that drains at the top, and it just goes on and on and on. And the music in it, when Sex Bob-omb is playing, the songs are all short and crazy, but they do such a great job with the music and how they present the music. And it's so funny too. The movie is so funny that the thing is just an audio visual masterpiece to behold, and it's got some great actors in it too, with Michael Cera, Kieran Culkin, Brie Larson, Allison Pill, Anna Kendrick is in it. It's just Chris Evans is in it. Like there's tons of people in it, and it's just such an original type of story, which is really what appealed to about it to me in the first place. And then just to see the books brought to film in such a cool way was pretty awesome. So next up, back to the 80s, the original Terminator. So the year is 1984. The setting is Los Angeles. We see 2 men arrive, buck naked, in these bright blue bursts. First guy is a big muscly kind of guy. Takes clothes from a bunch of street toughs by force. Second guy is a little more subdued in how he he gets clad and outfitted for his new adventures in Los Angeles. And as the story moves along, the first guy, the big beefy guy, we learn that he is targeting women in the city named Sarah Connor, of which there are 3. He goes to the first 2, eliminates them violently, and so Sarah Connor, who we are introduced to at the start of the movie as well, a young woman who works at a diner, sees all this stuff on the news and goes, what the hell? So she checks the phone book and it's like, okay, that Sarah Connor's dead, that Sarah Connor's dead. I'm the third and only remaining Sarah Connor in the city. So she tries to get in touch with the cops and fears that there's somebody kind of watching her. So she escapes off the street one night into this club, and she sees the guy that's been following her across the bar, and he's kind of looking at her. And so she fears this is the guy that's killing the other Sarah Connors. But from the entrance of the bar comes a new man she doesn't know, the big beefy guy that came from the future, and he is just about to eliminate her when the other guy at the bar gets in the way and starts blasting this guy all to hell. Panic erupts, and this fella that stuck up for Sarah grabs her and goes, we gotta go. She's like, well, you just shot this guy, like what the hell? All of a sudden, guy gets up. She's like, what the hell? They're like, we're out of here. So then, as they go on the lam with this guy chasing them, this man, Kyle Reese, informs Sarah that this is a Terminator unit. There is a robot inside of that man. It looks like a man. It is not. As you can see, I shot it a bazillion times, and he's still alive. He is from the future. He's come here to target you and eliminate you, and he will not stop until he's either destroyed or you are destroyed. So he fills her in as they escape and they find refuge. He fills Sarah in on what happens in the future with Judgment Day, with machines, with Cyberdyne systems creating this artificial intelligence named Skynet, which becomes self-aware, sees humans as threats, builds forces, and eliminates all humanity. So Kyle tells Sarah that your unborn son, who you haven't even conceived yet, John Connor, is the leader of this resistance in the future. He sent me back here to make sure you make it. And yeah, that's basically it. Not too crazy, right? So then Sarah's like, okay, with everything I've seen, I believe you, as far-fetched as it is. So they kind of go on the lam, just trying to keep ahead of this Terminator unit and off the grid so that he can't track them. Eventually, though, he keeps on catching up. The cops eventually get involved. They take Sarah into custody to make sure she's safe. Meanwhile, they arrest Kyle Reese, and he's like, you can put me in jail, you can keep Sarah in one of your offices, he's coming, you're all gonna die, that sort of thing. And what happens? The Terminator shows up at the cop shop, eliminates the whole station. Kyle and Sarah have to escape yet again. So the movie unfolds the rest of the way in this kind of another chase as the Terminator chases the two of them down, and they end up in this kind of factory that produces some sort of machinery, and where Kyle eventually is mortally wounded and Sarah is left to face the Terminator on her own, and well, obviously she makes it out because you're aware there's lots of other Terminator movies, but it's kind of this epic battle within this factory for her to gain her life and her temporary freedom, at least. So excellent movie from the mind of James Cameron all those years ago that spawned so many sequels, lots of video games, books, and I'm sure influenced a lot of other filmmakers and science fiction writers and such with the amazingness that was the original Terminator. Next up, early 2000s movie called Cursed. One of my favorite horror movies, even though it got shit on by critics, but that usually means I like it even more. Not on purpose, just by chance usually. This movie stars Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg as a brother-sister duo in the Los Angeles area. He's still in high school, whereas Ellie, so their names are Jimmy and Ellie. Jimmy's still in high school, whereas Ellie is in her early 20s, so she is out of the house, or not out of the house. Their parents recently died, so she's kind of taking care of Jesse as the head of the household now. She's out in the working world and is actually works for the Craig Kilborn show. So she's also, they both have their own things going on. Jesse is kind of a nerd, and at school he gets picked on by this bully named Bo, who's always making homosexual remarks towards Jesse. and calling him a wimp and all that stuff. And the problem for Jesse is that the girl he really likes, Brooke, is actually going out with Bo, so that just makes it kind of this double-edged knife plunging into his gut, right? So Jesse's got all this stuff going on. Meanwhile, Ellie, she's dating this guy named Jake, is it? I think, yeah. Who is set to open this new club in LA that's got all this buzz going, and he's like, I don't have time to be with you right now. I'm gonna need at least a few days to get this finished and whatever. And she's like, okay, yeah, whatever. So she's all offended by this, and as she's distracted by this, so one night she's late picking Jesse up, and as the two of them are driving down Mulholland Drive later on that night, some sort of animal runs out in front of the car. They hit it, swerve, hit this other car that goes tumbling down the hills. And as they go to check on this person to see if they're okay, they find a young woman who we saw in a cutscene at the start of the movie, trapped in the car. And eventually Jimmy and Ellie are able to free her. But just as they're about to get her out of the car and get her to safety, she's dragged into the wilderness by this animal, which Jimmy thinks is a wolf, some sort of big wolf. And as they go chasing after her to try and help, they are both Jimmy and Ellie are scratched by this animal, and are dismayed when this girl's torso gets thrown back at them. She's been cut in half, so it's been pretty savage episode for them. So they flee. The cops show up, and Jimmy's like, it was some sort of huge wolf, and the cops are like, come on, a giant wolf. Hasn't been a wolf sighting in California in 70 years or something like that. So there's probably a mountain lion. We'll find it, whatever. So everybody brushes it off. They go home. Jimmy's pissed at Ellie for not sticking up for him with the wolf thing. The next morning, they both wake up, and Jimmy notices he's starting to change a little bit. More confidence, more strength. And Ellie also notices some changes with her too. She's in the office, and one of the girls has a nosebleed, and all of a sudden she's like, and she sniffs it out and is like, whoa, why was I so turned on about the smell of blood, right? So there's changes happening within each of them. And although Jimmy is more vocal about voicing his concerns to Ellie in the fact that he's been researching werewolves, Ellie is like, no, look, silver picture frame. I shouldn't be able to pick this up, right? She picks it up, she's fine. So she's brushing it all off, whereas Jimmy's like, what the hell? As the movie moves on, it's basically the two of them, well, Ellie really coming to terms with the fact that this is really happening. Something is happening. There's been more deaths by this strange animal in the region in the ensuing days, and so they figure, okay, we have to do something about this. What do we do? And so they learn that they need to kill the beast that did this to them in order to release their own curse, and they have to do it by the end of the current lunar cycle or something like that. So eventually they learn, or they suspect, that Jake, who Ellie is dating, is the guy that did this to them. And at the opening of his club, it just turns into a shit show, and where they confront him, and a werewolf does show up, although it doesn't seem to be Jake, and lots of people get killed. There's a riot, and just when they have found the werewolf that they feel as though did this to them is responsible, and they've killed it, they get home that night, and they're like, nothing's changed. I'm still a werewolf. Like, I just picked up this silver thing and it's burning me. Like, what the hell? We didn't get the person we're supposed to get. And then that's when this person comes knocking, and there is one final battle for Jimmy and Ellie to perform before they're lifted of this curse. So I love the movie. It was a Wes Craven movie, and apparently I read about it, and it took 2 years later than they thought to make it, because there was all these rewrites, and they fired some people on the set and stuff like that. And they said even Wes Craven wasn't satisfied with it. That was what I read when it was released. But I loved every minute of it. I love monster movies, and I loved all the actors in this movie. I thought they were all amazing. And I watch it, I get chills, and I'm riveted every moment. I don't know what it is, but it's a fantastic movie. I highly recommend. But don't be mad at me if you hate it, because apparently everybody else did. So, last movie. Kind of more recent one, but not recent. Mike Myers in The Love Guru. This one is a little close to the heart because A, it's Mike Myers, a Canadian boy who's so bloody funny. B, the plot line. Mike Myers plays Guru Pitka, who was an American. He was born in America, but grew up in India when his parents died, and he sought to be grow up and be a world famous guru. And all these years later, he is that, but he's always number 2 behind Deepak Chopra, and he wants to. There's his manager Dick Pants is saying, if you get on Oprah, you could have a chance of passing Deepak. So that's all Guru Pitka wants to do, is get on Oprah. And he sees his chance coming out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Club. Have a superstar named Darren Roanoke, who has recently split with his girlfriend Prudence, and ever since that happened, he's been shit. The Leafs can't win without him, but he can't score a goal to save his life right now. His hands are shaking, he's a wreck. And that is when the current owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Jane Bullard, played by Jessica Alba, who is so hot, and the Bullard name is a play on kind of words for, I assume, for Harold Ballard, who was the Leafs owner through the 80s and maybe the late 70s. I don't remember how long his reign was, but he was not a well-loved owner because he didn't make good decisions, and the Leafs were shit all that time he was in ownership. So they're kind of playing into a few things here with this, but anyways, Jane Bullard offers Guru Pitka $2 million if she can fix her star center, as the Leafs are set to play the Los Angeles Kings in the Stanley Cup final. So Guru Pitka accepts because the Oprah show has said, if you can fix Darren Roanoke and get him and Prudence back together, we'll give you a spot on the show. So Guru Pitka has all this stuff tied up in this situation. So he goes to Toronto. He meets Darren. Darren wants none of it until Guru puts on a bit of a show about, oh yes, there is a connection between your lackluster play and your split with Prudence. And so Darren's like, okay, bring it. And Prudence, in the meantime, is now going out with the Los Angeles Kings goalie, Jacques Lecoq Grande. And he's played by Justin Timberlake. And there's so much funniness in that whole thing. But so basically, Guru Pitka gets to Toronto. He takes Darren Roanoke under his wing. He's got this system called drama, distract, regress. It's an anagram for something. And so he has to take Darren through these 5 stages with no substitutions, no cheating, no skipping ahead, no corners cut, before he'll be fixed and back to normal, and hopefully get Prudence back in the process. Only problem is, Stanley Cup Finals is just about to start, and he doesn't have that much time. It starts out rough, but he starts picking up steam. But then when the Oprah show kind of rushes him to make a decision, he does cut a corner with Darren. And it almost costs the Leafs the Stanley Cup Final. But Guru Pitka learns his lesson, goes back, begs forgiveness, does it the right way, and saves the day just in the nick of time. And the Leafs win the cup. Again, another movie that got shit on by critics, but maybe it's all American critics and they don't get the whole hockey thing or whatever, but it is so funny. It's just like Austin Powers. All the stupid little gags and stuff in there. There is so much funny stuff in this movie that you're laughing almost the entire time. And then, of course, for me, with the Leafs, not only hockey, but the fucking Leafs being, who are Mike Myers' favorite team, obviously, being at the forefront of this movie, it just made it even extra special. And then you bring in the fact that he brought Vern Troyer in, who was Mini-Me in Austin Powers, to play the Leafs coach, which was hilarious. And then you've got, of course, Jessica Alba in there as well. The whole movie is just, to me, a masterpiece, a comedic masterpiece. So if you haven't watched it, I would give it a chance because, hey, I'm never wrong, right? Last up, I don't have a case for this, but it's a video game that recently I found I had these My Nintendo points that I forgot I had. I only had $5 worth, but I'm like, I'm going to go on to the Nintendo eShop and see if there's any games on sale that I can get. And lo and behold, I had to pay an extra $2, so I paid like maybe $7 in total with the $5 credit I had, and I got 3 new games. The first of these that I played, which is the one I'm talking about today, is called Blaze Rush. It's a Russian game developed by a company over there called Targem or Tangem. I can't remember exactly. And it's this racing game that is very much like, remember Super Off-Road with the little pickup trucks? That kind of angled top-down view with really simplistic gameplay. It's that same style, but the only problem is there's no brakes. Your car is always going. You're just steering it where it needs to go. And along the way, you pick up different types of turbos to give you speed boosts, different type of weapons to mess with your competition, and basically you just need to win every race, whatever the stipulations on that race are. Some of them are just normal 3-lap races. There's this one called King of the Hill, where the guy who's in the lead gets a point for every second he's in the lead, and the first person to 50 points or whatever wins. And then there's this one where this big like combine thing chases you and crushes cars, and the further ahead you are, and the later on you get crushed in any given round, gives you more points. So at the end of a certain amount of rounds, whoever has the most points wins. So there's a lot of varied gameplay. There's lots of pickups. There's lots of different vehicles you lock along the way, and the story's pretty cool. It's like you're on this. It takes place across this solar system that is made up, and you race on these different planets, and you start off on this one planet, but then you're kicked off because this company is terraforming the land. So as you go throughout each location, the company is always chasing you and kicking you off each world as they terraform it and have their way with the world. And then in the end, in the sixth world, there's 6 total worlds with at least probably 10 races per world. So there's lots of racing involved in this game. In that last world, at the end, you face the boss of this corporation and save the day, and any future planets falling to their whims in the future. So such a fun game. We literally, James and I played through it in less than a week. It was one of those games that it's quick, it's easy to play, you get onto it really fast, and more importantly, it's just fun. And so we just, every day, we popped on for an hour and just blasted through it in lightning time. So highly recommend. It was only $2 or $3 on sale at the time. I think it's normally more than that, like maybe $18 or something like that, but they had it heavily discounted, and just from the looks of it, like I love that Super Off-Road game back in the day. TNT Racers is another one I really like. It had that same kind of vibe, so I knew just by seeing it, I was like, yes, I want this, especially for $2 or $3. So if you get a chance to download that to your Switch, or I don't know if it's still on the Wii U or whatever, I don't think that it is. I think it's only on the Switch. So if you have a Switch and are looking for a cheap, fun game to play, I would highly recommend it. So, but that's all. I've been saying a lot of words today, so I'm going to cut myself off now because I'm probably not even going to be able to post this. It's so long, but we will see you soon enough. So long.